Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney at the R&R Law Group. We're located in the always beautiful and sunny Scottsdale, Arizona, and today we've got some brutal news to attend to. As usual, we go over to the mind map so that we can get our bearings straight and see exactly what we're about to unpack today. But you'll see a lot of the conversation out there all over the interwebs, all over the fruited plains of America are about Biden's brutal inflation numbers. And, these are not just Biden's inflation numbers. Okay, these are all of our numbers. This is all of our dollars, except Alan. Alan is here from Ireland. Shout out to Alan from Ireland. But most of our dollars are all being inflated away thanks to the president's policies. And so we're going to unpack a lot of that today. CNBC was out and man, they were just like, it's a bloodbath over here. This guy, I don't even know his name, but he was over there talking a lot about, sort of the red wave, the bloodbath that was taking place. And then we have to hear from Jake Tapper. And so CNN and others were just watching the meltdown. Biden was out trying to paper over a lot of this stuff. He had a really bad split screen because the Dow Jones and many of the different markets were just plummeting into the ground. And so Joe Biden was out and CNN was saying this is a little bit of a problematic frame by frame. So we'll take a look at that. The White House came out with an official statement, and then we'll check in with two Republican senators and see what their perspective is and are. We've got Senator Blackburn and Ted Cruz reacting to some of the inflation stuff. So we'll take a look at that. And then we've got three big updates on the Trump cases. The judge was actually threatened by a woman who got indicted. You can see here, actually not an indicted. She got charged. She got a criminal complaint filed against her out of the Southern District of Texas. And so she left some scathing voicemails over on the voicemail of Judge Aileen Cannon, the judge who appointed the special master. A woman very unhappy about it. Her name is Tiffany Shea. And so we'll take a look at that. We also had a response yesterday. We spent some time talking about some of Donald Trump's and his defense teams, their motions into the court, and the government prosecutors responded with their memo. And so we've got about a 12-page document that we'll take a look at there that was submitted by the prosecutors saying, please, whatever you do, do not appoint a special master because America will be dead as we know it. And then we'll take a look at this letter that came over from Congress. Somebody in Congress, her name is Carolyn Maloney. She's about to get her butt thrown out like some old baloney, is now saying that there may be some more documents that Donald Trump has that might justify, I guess, another raid, maybe 3 or 4 more raids. They should just follow him around and raid whatever building he's in. But Carolyn Maloney sent a letter over to the National Archives, Deborah Steedlewald, and we'll go through it. There's more documents. There's more overdue library books, apparently. And so we'll take a look at that. And then finally, our last segment, my friends, is all going to be about Hunter Biden. We've got some news breaking out of there. Well, not in breaking. I mean, we've been covering this for like 2 years now. But CNN has finally gotten a memo. This guy, Andrew Rice, is a journalist over at New York Magazine. And he is saying on CNN that there might be a second Hunter Biden laptop. Oh, man, you're kidding me. Another one? I wonder what's on that one. And we have Chuck Grassley, who is saying that retired or resigned or fired or whatever former agent Timothy Thibault, saying that, yeah, he's going to be called into Congress. We're going to haul his butt on in here, and we're going to ask him some serious questions. And so we've got an article about that. And then some more reaction from other Republicans. Ron Johnson, who wants whistleblowers from the FBI and the DOJ to come and say hi to him. And of course, James Comer, another representative who's on the Oversight Committee. We're going to hear from him as well. And so as you can see, my friends, boy, oh boy, do we have a lot to get to today. 3 whopping segments to attend to. And if you want to be a part of the show, the place to do that is over at our community, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. You can see the address over there. And let's see who's chatting away over there, shall we? And I just accidentally pressed the back button. So now I have to press the forward button. Who's here? Sugar Britches, John McGarvey, Lilu Dallas Multipass is here. Shout out to Lilu Dallas Multipass. Zach Nichols is also here. C. Reed, Sugar Britches is in the house. Let's see. John McGarvey. Oh my gosh. Lulu Dallas multi-passes. Just, oh gosh. Oh my gosh. Outstanding. All right. And so Vienti Kiss Prime and others chatting away over on Locals. You can also join and click that YouTube membership join button right next to that subscribe button and join us over there. You get access to the Hunter Biden GIF, which will be very useful today because we have a whole segment on Hunter Biden. And so I'd invite you to check that out. And of course, lastly, I am a criminal defense lawyer over at the R&R Law Group. We help good people charged with crimes. We offer free case evaluations over at 480-787-0394. And if you want to learn a little bit more about sort of the mechanics behind how our law firm uses YouTube and videos to help people, to provide value and to help people solve their legal problems, well, come check out my free masterclass that's taking place this Thursday. Go to ytclientcashmachinemasterclass.com. Totally free. It's really for lawyers and business owners who want to use YouTube for their service-based businesses. But if you want to come and check it out, maybe there's some good knowledge in there that you can take away. ytclientcashmachinemasterclass.com. Totally free. I am going to pitch something at the end, so be forewarned. But come and check us out. Any one of those places, we'll look forward to seeing you. And now it is time, with that out of the way, to get into the meat and potatoes of the program. And so we'll just cue this up. Biden's brutal inflation numbers hitting the books. Everybody was prognosticating that this was a foreseeable outcome, except maybe them. But we now see that the numbers are not good. They were hoping that they were going to put a taper on some of this inflation so that all of us could get back to our lives after being locked away for 2 years and after spending billions and trillions of dollars in order to paper over this stuff. Well, it's all coming home to roost. The chickens are finally here, as Obama would say. And we're going to go through this. We've got the Biden White House trying to paper over this, reaction from the Republicans. But we're going to start on top. As soon as those numbers hit, as soon as the inflation numbers hit, and you've seen them, and there are all sorts of different interpretations, and people will say, well, what does this mean? And what about CPI with energy and with food, and take out the rent and add all these numbers in, and 0.1 and 8.3 and 10.12.3 and on and on and on and on. Well, you can see sort of what the consequences of all those numbers are just by taking a look at the stock market. And the analyst over on CNBC, he was looking at it, and this is what it looked like today when it hit, right? And this was at the start of the day. 32,287 is where it started. And you can just see that flashing little orb there at the bottom of this chart is the collapse of the stock market. Yeah, it didn't look good. And you can see right here as the markets are opening on the day, it's just a sea of red. And, you know, look, I am not somebody who likes to take glee in hardship of other Americans, and I'm not going to do that here, right? When this stuff happens, a lot of people get wiped out, a lot of people get hurt, and it's a terrible, terrible thing. And, I don't want this to become like a COVID death scoreboard that we criticized here all the time, where, they would just publish more dead bodies and everybody on CNN would be like, yes, Trump's going down. Look at all these dead people. Yeah, more dead bodies. And so, the red bloodbath is sort of like that. It's like, my gosh, God, it really is bad. But on the other hand, you're like, well, we told you so. I mean, good Lord. How, look, I'm not an economics major, but I can certainly tell you that if you start printing money out of thin air, hand over fist, and doling it out with no rhyme or reason, you might cause some problems in the economy. But again, I didn't go to Harvard or Oxford, so what the hell do I know? But this guy obviously pays a lot of attention to this stuff. And so let's listen to him explaining this at the outset of the morning, and then we'll check back in with CNN and see what they have to say at the close of the markets. Here it is this morning.
It's food that we have to pay attention to, up 0.6%, double the expectation. And
now
the high water mark there is up 0.9. That was in April, and that went back to 1981, up 0.6. Well, if you look at up 0.7 in June, that's kind of our.
Now, you just look at the different charts flipping around, right? And look at all of the markets just adjusting massively. Major raises in the 10-year treasuries, dollars going up massively, and he's just riffing through the numbers. But then you get to this. Look at the fair value, S&P, and it's just blood red all over the place. And it kind of just trended that way all throughout the remainder of the day. Even Bitcoin and all of these things, you can see Bitcoin down here in the bottom left shed about 500 points. And it just was like red blood death. Not good. All over the markets. And we all have to live with that, right? This is problematic for all of us. And the reason why it's important to pay attention to it, and I think the reason why some people might mistake the attention with sort of giddiness or glee, is that this stuff is critical to everything else that we do, and it's been foreseeable. And a lot of people have been saying this is going to be the result, and now it's here. And so those people, of course, are feeling vindicated. That was at the start and the opening of the market. CNN and Jake Tapper, unfortunately, had to break the news to their audience that things did not look good today. At the close of the market, Jake Tapper breaking news saying, stock market closed pretty down. Things are pretty bad over here. Why don't I turn it over to you, so you can explain how all this works for us.
Welcome to The Lead. I'm Jake Tapper. We start with breaking news in the Money Lead. One of the worst days of the year for investors.
Yikes.
Stocks taking a remarkable tumble. The Dow closing down more than 1,200 points on the heels of today's inflation report. You hear the bell there, the closing bell. Fears of a recession.
Now here, this is kind of hilarious. So you just saw that Mr. Tapper was walking us through this graphic here. That looks pretty rough, right? Minus 1,200. Oh, that's not too good. Almost 4% down on the day. Pretty rough. But then they cut over to this screenshot of these happy people to ring the closing bell. And they're all celebrating. And so what a horrible day. You sort of wait, I guess, your whole life to go bang that gavel on the New York Stock Exchange on the closing bell. And you're going to do it on the worst day since June of 2020. Not really that much to post about on Instagram, I guess.
In the air, let's get right to CNN business correspondent Rahel Solomon in New York. Rahel, how bad and how serious is this damage?
Tell us.
Pretty serious, and it was bad and only got worse throughout the day as losses accelerated. Yikes. To put this in perspective, Jake, this was the worst day for the Dow since June of 2020. So this was a historically bad day as investors digested this morning's inflation report. I want to take you to the Dow closing lower by about 4%, the S&P 4.3%, and the Nasdaq about 5.2%, let's call it. So why is all of this happening? Well, that inflation report we got this morning, which, by the way, comes a week before the Fed is set to meet again, but it showed that while energy prices are declining, and so inflation seems to be easing a bit, slightly, and a lot of key categories, Jake, inflation continues to accelerate. Categories like shelter, categories like food, categories like medical care costs. So that is really concerning.
Yeah.
When the Fed meets next.
Yeah, it is concerning. She said, right, everything seems like it's kind of accelerating in a lot of those areas. Food, shelter, medical supplies, all going up. Yeah, gas is going down because everybody realized, holy crap, it's almost $5 a gallon where I'm living. And we got to really pump the brakes literally on this thing. But the other markets, the other categories are running away. And CNN is reporting it. They're sitting here going, yeah, it's pretty bad. Worst day since June 2020. And remember the situation in June 2020, right? The problem back then was we were in the middle of COVID. We had just declared a national, emergency back in March, and the whole country was coming to a screeching halt. And they were starting to print money hand over fist. But CNN now having to break the news that things are not looking so good for the country. And it's not good news, right? Schadenfreude is the idea that you sort of like to see your enemy fall off his roof a little bit. But we all have to live here. We all have to live with that person and with the economic conditions that they have created before they fell off the roof. Joe Biden was out today celebrating this stuff. And I talked about this on our morning walk and talk for members on Locals or members on YouTube. But we went through this and Biden is sort of spiking the football. If you go over to the White House Twitter account or the president's feed, he's out there all morning. Oh, yeah, Inflation Reduction Act. What a tremendous victory. And all these videos of, little old ladies with like puppies or something. Like, oh, okay, well, she seems happy. So I guess the country must be great. All day. And he gave this little speech. We're going to hear about it in a minute. But even CNN was saying, holy moly, this is pretty unfortunate. Here's Joe Biden in front of some DC building out there, wherever he is. And he is communicating that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to bring us all to the promised land or something. Simultaneously, take a look at this graphic of the Dow Jones Industrial Average over here on the right. Down red arrow. It says minus 1217.42. That's 1,217 points on the day. Now you can see the chyron at the bottom of the screen says Biden celebrates the passage of his Inflation Reduction Act. And you go, Oh, well, that's not a whole lot of cause for celebration there, Joe. Let's listen to what this CNN anchor says as she notices the weird juxtaposition of the crashing stock market with Joe Biden's celebratory speech.
Stood up.
Okay, you're listening there to President Biden at the White House. He's celebrating the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. He says that he's been fighting Big Pharma for decades. But there is this unfortunate split screen right now with the Dow taking a total beating, down more than 1,200 points. And so it feels like it's hard to be celebratory for some people in the crowd.
Yeah, kind of a rough day to be out there spiking the football when the stock market has been absolutely demolished on the day. But Joe Biden does that because most of the time he doesn't really know where he is or what we should be talking about at any given point in time. Now, there is a real possibility, that tomorrow that this thing rallies all the way back, and we've seen these swings come and go. And so it may not be something that is a permanent, down, but it certainly gives you some hint that a lot of the people with a lot of money and investors and people who are in these markets don't have a whole lot of confidence based on these newly released numbers. Simultaneously with Joe Biden's delusion, we of course have Nancy Pelosi, who is out there, who is also communicating something about the Inflation Reduction Act. Here is Nancy Pelosi saying why this was such an important bill.
Many friends, what a thrill it is to be here to celebrate this life-changing legislation, making the Inflation Reduction Act. Inflation Reduction Act, so beautifully named for all that it does.
Beautifully
named.
As
the name suggests, this landmark law is...
Okay, the Inflation Reduction Act, as you would imagine, should be reducing inflation, and it should do so by the act, the law. What they're passing should reduce inflation, right? And she just said, what a beautiful name this thing is. Now, what does it actually do? Does it reduce inflation, Nancy?
Cutting costs and inflation fighting and driving down costs for kitchen table items for America's working families. Mr. President.
Inflation fighting, reducing costs for kitchen table items, I guess. I'm still waiting to see what this results in. Like, are your eggs and milk and cereal going to be cheaper? Is your bacon going to be cheaper now that we have this Inflation Reduction Act? So Nancy Pelosi, I think, had a difficult time getting the name right. Still must not know exactly what inflation means. Meanwhile, here is what the White House said on these horrific numbers. Statement of the president, Joe Biden, on the new CPI numbers in September. The president said, today's data show more progress in bringing global inflation down in the U.S. economy. And I don't really know what that is supposed to mean, to be honest with you. Bringing global inflation down in the U.S. economy. All right, let's see if we can figure this out. Overall, prices have been essentially flat in our country these last 2 months, he says. That is welcome news for Americans with more work to do. Gas prices are down an average of $1.30 a gallon beginning of the summer. This month, we saw some price increases slow from the month before at the grocery store. But they're still going up. And real wages went up again for the second month in a row, giving people breathing room. And he says it's going to take more time and resolve to bring inflation down, which is why we passed the Inflation Reduction Act to lower the cost of healthcare, prescription drugs, and energy. And my economic plan is showing that as we bring prices down, we're creating good paying jobs and bringing manufacturing back to America. Oh, my goodness. Well, all right. So not a whole lot to say on that other than it's more time. Hang on, more time to resolve and bring inflation down. But I guess, yeah, so it's going to lower your costs. So I think the plan here is not to actually reduce inflation. It's just to provide more funds for people who might be hit harder by the inflation, right? So it's actually spending money to introduce more money into the economy to deal with the inflation. So you're sort of printing money that causes inflation to deal with the inflation you've already caused by giving people more things like healthcare, prescription drugs, and energy subsidies off of printed money that we don't have, which will go back into the inflationary cycle. Okay, so that is our president. Holy moly. All right, so that's what we've got out of there. Now, about as clear as that is, we still need to go over to Karine Jean-Pierre because she's going to give us a little bit more details on what the White House has to say about all this. This is the White House press secretary, Karine. She gets asked by somebody in the media. They say, the inflation numbers just came out. Looks like it's worse than it's supposed to be. And you said that your Inflation Reduction Act was going to resolve this. It doesn't seem like it's working. What say you, Miss White House?
On the inflation report that came out today, the president is promising that the Inflation Reduction Act will do just that and bring down costs. But this bill does not address food or housing, prices of which we are seeing going up. So what is your message to Americans who are seeing these rising costs? And are you confident that you're doing enough to finally bring these down?
So look, the president has said for some time now, when it comes to his number one economic priority is to deal with inflation, is to make sure that we are lowering costs for for the American people, for American families, Americans who have to come around the table, once a month in particular to figure out how are they going to pay those bills. Again, this is why the event that we're having in less than 45 minutes to celebrate and talk about, you'll hear from the president about the Inflation Reduction Act, is so critical. That is why Democrats and this president did the hard work to get that done, is to lower costs on healthcare, to lower cost on prescription drugs, and also energy costs as well. Look, when you look at the data, the inflation data, we're seeing more progress bringing global inflation down in the U.S. economy.
There it
as
is.
I just stated moments ago. Overall,
bringing the global inflation down in the U.S. economy. She said that right there. What the heck does that even mean?
The inflation data, we're seeing more progress bringing global inflation down in the U.S. economy, as I just stated moments ago. Overall, prices have been essentially flat.
Look, I don't know what kind of global inflation she's talking about. Okay, we in the United States, we printed a ton of money of U.S. dollars, and we have a bunch of dollars that we inflated, right? So I think most Americans are concerned about American inflation in America, not global inflation based on whatever everybody else is doing. So I don't really know what she's talking about. Maybe somebody from Oxford can enlighten me. But that's Karine Jean-Pierre responding to some of this stuff. And we had a very interesting little locals tip came in from our very own happy, emotional, sometimes grouchy old cat lady. And she's sharing this over from trueflation.com. Yeah, and trueflation.com is a website that is supposed to sort of measure things based on the actual cost of goods that you see out there. And food, 11%, transportation, 11%, utilities, 14%, alcohol, 6%, and so on. So, right, the numbers are all rigged. Thank you to emotional old cat lady for those Trueflation numbers and for the tip over on locals. But we have reaction now. Republicans responding to this terrible inflation news. Senator Marsha Blackburn is out. She says, this is a lot worse than it even sounds. The numbers here are really compounding, and they're trying to hide them and sort of lie to you about what they really mean. Here is the senator.
The inflation numbers are in 8.3% for this month. We're up over 13% over the past year and a half. Bidenflation is on the rise. So why would the White House think today was a great day to go out and celebrate spending another $700 billion?
That goes right back into the problem.
$$1 billion in new taxes. $369 billion for the Green New Deal that is going to run up the cost at the pump, the cost of your electric bill, and the cost of everything you buy. I tell you what, it is beyond me what they are thinking, but what I do know is Tennesseans are tired of this.
Well, we'll see what the Republicans do about it. Haven't heard much out of them by way of proposals other than, Lindsey Graham saying something about abortion, whatever. But, on these issues, the Republicans are largely asleep at the wheel. Meanwhile, we've got Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is saying inflation is just a part of the problem. The Biden policies are much more disastrous than just inflation. Look at everything else. We've got crime, we've got border problems, we've got school problems, a whole litany of them. Inflation is just the very beginning.
If you look at the issues that are racking the country, that are hurting Americans across the country, you have number one, inflation. The Democrats have no plan for inflation other than to make it worse, to spend trillions more and drive inflation up even more. Gas prices, they have no plan to reduce gas prices other than to make it worse by hammering American oil and gas production. Crime, they have no plan to reduce crime other than to make it worse by continuing to support radical leftist DAs and leftists who try to undermine, defund, or abolish the police. And illegal immigration, they have no plan to stop. They don't want to stop. Their plan is more illegal immigration, more chaos at the border. And so their only political strategy, which you can see their cronies in the corporate media leaning in on, is distraction. They want to scream Donald Trump all day long because there is nothing on planet Earth they hate more than Donald J. Trump. They want to unleash corrupt partisans at the Department of Justice and the FBI to go after Donald Trump to try to distract people. And they want to send Joe Biden up to give the most divisive and hateful speech we have seen a president give in our lifetimes, calling half of the country fascists. They're hoping to scare people into showing up and voting for an agenda that's failing. And what's amazing, they don't plan to change. They don't promise change. They promise more of the same disastrous policy agenda.
It does, in fact, seem like they are doubling down everywhere you look. We just heard from Bannon, and that's now been vetted and verified by CBS News and by Tucker Carlson and by Harmeet Dillon. But they are going after more Trump allies, more people who are in his circle. And so it feels like it's just the beginning. The Biden administration is continuing to slide into disarray. Their policies are falling apart at the seams. And they've got nothing left to talk about or to do other than to prosecute their political enemies. And so that is now their A game. Of course, we will continue to cover that. But as Ted Cruz had mentioned, it's all about Trump. And so now we've got several updates on the Trump case that we do need to attend to. 3 different documents that we're going to get a look at. The Trump judge threatened Judge Aileen Cannon receiving very nasty voicemails from an individual out of Texas. We'll take a look at a criminal complaint that was filed against that person. You can't threaten a federal judge. That's crazy. So we'll read through that. But then we'll also take a look at a new filing by government prosecutors or the government representatives responding to Donald Trump. Remember, Trump wants a special master. There's been a back and forth debating this. And the government finally responded. And lastly, it seems like Congress may want more raids. There was a letter that went out from a congresswoman over to the National Archives saying, we think that Trump still has outstanding documents. And that means that we probably should just raid him again, I guess, and go pick them up or something. So we'll read through all 3 of these. But let's start with the government's response when they were debating or trying to get the judge to reverse the original stay that the judge put in place. This motion, Donald Trump versus the United States of America, 12 pages, filed September 13th in the West Palm Beach Division out of the Southern District of Florida. U.S. government is replying now in support of its motion for a stay. Trump filed a request for a special master. The judge granted it. Right after the granting of the request, the government turned around and said, Judge, please stay that order while we appeal this, because if we appeal it and it comes back down and you lose, well, we don't want our investigation to have been jeopardized. And so why don't you just stay your order? Let us continue on this path until an appellate judge decides. And Trump responded, and there was a back and forth. And now this is the government's memo. They say, the United States motion for a stay pending appeal of this court seeks their very limited but critical relief. The government seeks a stay only as to a discrete set of just over 100 records marked as classified. They write, that is, records that were specifically sought by a prior grand jury subpoena whose unauthorized retention may constitute a crime, and with markings signifying their unauthorized disclosure might actually damage America. So the government says, our stay motion, asking the judge to not impose the special master, demonstrates that the government is likely to succeed on the merits because they say Trump cannot plausibly establish any property interest or privilege as to the seized records, right? And this is starting to sound a lot like the original document. They say the government and the public are irreparably harmed by the court's order if the order remains in effect. And they say a partial stay would impose no cognizable harm on Trump. Trump responded, and the government says, when he did, Judge, in his response to you, he ignored all of our showings. They say instead, Trump principally seeks to raise questions about the classification status of the records and their categorization under the Presidential Records Act. And that's true. That's the issue in question here. We were litigating. We're saying we have to litigate this issue. Confidential, yes or no? Executively privileged, yes or no? Presidential records or personal records? Which one? All debatable. And so, yes, of course, Trump raised those. But they say Trump does not actually assert, much less provide any evidence that any of those seized records bearing classification markings have in fact been declassified. Right? So they're saying, but Trump is only making the point that they could have been declassified, or they might have been, the privilege might have been existing over those documents, or they may have been personal records, right? Many things that he could do, but he didn't actually present evidence of them. And so they're saying, Judge, and more importantly, in addition to that, the issues that Trump attempts to raise are ultimately irrelevant. They don't even matter. Even if plaintiff had declassified these records, and even if he somehow had categorized them as his personal records for the purposes of the Presidential Records Act, neither of which has even been shown by him, Judge, nothing in the Presidential Records Act or any other source of law establishes a plausible claim of privilege or any other justification for an injunction restricting the government's review and the use of records in the middle of a national security investigation. Right? And so they're saying, listen, Judge. And remember, we have to make sure that we're keeping the actual issue here at the center. This isn't about whether Trump is guilty or not. This isn't about whether he committed any crimes or whether these were confidential or not. This is about appointing a special master. That's it, right? And a lot of the times when we're talking about these issues, we can forget about that. And so this is what they're saying. They're saying, look, even if the PRA is settled one way, even if the confidential stuff is settled another way, the fact is, at this moment in time, right now, when you, Judge, just issued an injunction, when you just said we can't continue to rummage through all of Melania's stuff, we have to stop doing that. They said your injunction at this moment, when we're debating a special master, is not appropriate. And they say nothing in Trump's response rebuts the compelling public interest in granting the limited stay the government seeks. Obviously, I disagree with that. I think that there was plenty in there to disagree with, to rebut that. They're saying that there is a compelling public interest in not having a special master appointed. Why? Because that would delay their investigation. And that's, I think, just a matter of opinion at this point, right? Unless you know what the documents are. If you do know what the documents are, or you don't know what the documents are, but you trust the DOJ, then you say, okay, well, they know what they are. So they'd be in a better position to tell us whether this really is harming the public if they're delayed or not. But I just don't buy it. First of all, I don't trust the DOJ at all, or the FBI at all. And two, these documents were sitting around in Trump's Mar-a-Lago storage facility, which was good enough for 4 years as president. For how long? So now they're turning around and claiming urgency all of a sudden. Delay is going to cause a catastrophe. We even know that Merrick Garland himself delayed for like 3 weeks while he was drinking his tea or whatever, mulling this over. So Trump and his response, they said many times that actually your compelling public interest, your excuse for why we should not have a special master doesn't really hold all that water, because a delay is fine. It's reasonable. It's not even a delay because you already delayed a long length of time and Merrick Garland delayed and all the things. That was in Trump's response. Now we get to some discussion. They say, the government writes, they say, look, Judge, the reason why you should not appoint a special master, or at least stay the appointment of a special master as related to those 100 documents, is because the following. Number one, the government is likely to succeed on the merits. We're going to take this up to the Court of Appeals and we're going to win. And you're going to feel like a big dummy when it comes back down and all of this says, Judge, you were wrong. The prosecutors write, first, Trump has failed to rebut the government showing that the court lacks equitable jurisdiction. right? And this is some heavy lifting stuff. So we'll take a quick look at this and then move on. But remember, equitable jurisdiction means the court has the ability to fashion an equitable remedy, right? They can sort of make things equal. They can say, this doesn't feel fair. Okay, a special master seems like it fairs things up a little bit, and so we can do that. Prosecutor said, Judge, you don't have the ability to appoint a referee. Who do you think you are? You have no equitable jurisdiction to do this at all. And Trump's people said, yes, you do. And so the government is saying, when Trump said, yes, you do, they didn't do a good job of that. They say that he has categorically no property interest in the records. And those records marked as classified, they say that they have not proven their status, but they say even if Trump did declassify these records while he was president, a proposition that Trump doesn't even assert in any of his filings, he doesn't have any sworn declaration and he doesn't have any evidence of it at all. There's no record bearing this at all. But they say any record that does bear classification markings was necessarily created by the government and therefore is not his property. If we put a stamp on the document, if we put a sticker on that thing, guess what? It's our sticker and we have fixed it to your thing. So that means it's our thing now. They write furthermore, Trump observes that the PRA generally entitles him to access to his records during his tenure. But they say that his interpretation is mistaken. They say to the contrary, you do not have any property rights in presidential records. They say that U.S. Code Section 2202 says that the United States has complete ownership of possession and control over the presidential records. And yes, and I know, but there's a distinction between the two types of property. Presidential records and personal records are different distinctions. But they're just saying that since it has the sticker on it, therefore it's a presidential record or it's a classified document, and so it falls within the purview of their jurisdiction. And again, I'm making the same point. This is an issue to be litigated. They say Trump has no plausible property interest that would justify compelling this discrete set of records to be returned to him. The 100 documents, they seem a little bit nervous now. They really don't want those documents, 100 documents, to go back. They say, thus, the government is likely to succeed. Okay, we're going to win. There is no equitable jurisdiction. And so, Judge, you might as well just not give them over now, since when we go up to the Court of Appeals, we're going to come back and win anyways. And the prosecutors say, secondly, Judge, Trump has no viable claim of privilege as to the records bearing these classified markings. He does not even contest that he lacks a viable attorney-client privilege claim with regard to the records marked as classified, because those records wouldn't be communications between him and his attorneys, right? And I don't think he's ever made that claim, right? It's been executive privilege claims. And so that's sort of a red herring there, right? Trump, I don't remember Trump making those. I mean, there were attorney-client privilege matters that were the subject of a lot of debate here, because we have the taint team and the privilege team, which is filtering all those things out. But they're saying apparently that doesn't apply to the classified documents, right? So we've got all these different buckets of documents we're talking about. The prosecutors say, and Trump offers no response to the government's multiple arguments demonstrating that he can't even assert executive privilege to prevent the executive privilege from reviewing prior records. They read through some of the Nixon case law, which we've talked a lot about here. And they say that the court notes, Trump says that this court expressed skepticism about the government's privilege arguments in a prior order. But the court's observation focused on whether a former president is entirely foreclosed from asserting the privilege, and the court did not specifically address those key issues. They say that Trump is trying to change the subject by holding out the possibility that he could have declassified some of the seized records, or that he could have designated them as personal records. They say that those fare no better. Yeah, because they don't care about the presumption of innocence anymore. Do you see that? They don't care if you could, right? They don't want to have to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is could. Something could have happened, or somebody could have done that, or this could have gone that way or gone that way, right? If it could have happened that way, and there's actually some plausibility to that, yeah, that's pretty much called reasonable doubt. Any doubt that's based in reason is called reasonable doubt. Okay, so here The fact that Trump could have declassified these things, that's a very viable defense. If he's indicted, it's going to be the key defense. If he did in fact declassify these documents, if he could have designated them personal records, right? If he could have, that would take them outside of the problematic category and make it non-criminal. In fact, the Presidential Records Act don't even dictate criminal penalties for violations of them. They just say work it out between the president and NARA. So they're trying to do what's called burden shifting and to shift this burden over to him. They don't want Trump to be able to try to use possible alternative explanations. They want Trump to prove that he is not guilty. Okay, rather than them proving that Trump is guilty, they want Trump to disprove his guilt. Trump has no burden to do that at all. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant. They're saying, wait a minute, if Trump is innocent, why doesn't he just submit some evidence of his innocence? Well, he could just submit some documents. They say, as already noted, plaintiff has now filed multiple lengthy submissions with the court that stop short of asserting that he in fact took any of these actions with respect to any of the seized records, including those at issue in these motions. In light of the classification markings, official cover sheets, and other indicia, they say such possibilities should not be given weight absent plaintiffs putting forward competent evidence. They want Trump to prove his case now. They want him to prove his innocence. They are shifting the burden over to the defense, and it's reprehensible. But it's the government prosecutors that we're talking about here, and it's Donald Trump. Now, in any event, writes the government, they say even if Trump had declassified any of the approximately 100 seized records while he was still in office, the government's, quote, demonstrated specific need for those records would easily overcome any asserted claim of privilege. And for obvious reasons, they say the intelligence community would have a compelling need to understand which documents had been declassified, why and how they were declassified, the impact, including the IC's protection of its sources and mechanisms and all this stuff. And they say the DOJ and the FBI, they also need to know. And so if anybody in the current administration says that they absolutely need something, then they just go get it. And that overcomes any claim of privilege by the outgoing administration is what they say. They say the DOJ and the FBI would have a compelling need to review the documents. And we also had a May 2022 grand jury subpoena that gave us access to this stuff. And now Trump, his suggestion that he categorize certain records, if true, only give us other reasons why he cannot assert executive privilege. They write, if Trump truly means to suggest that, while president, he chose to categorize records with markings like secret and top secret as his, quote, personal records for purposes of the PRA, then he cannot assert that very same records are protected by executive privilege, that they're also presidential communications made in furtherance of performance of his duties. In any event, they write, whether plaintiff declared the documents to be personal has no bearing on the government's need and their compelling need to review them, both for national security and for the unlawful retention of national defense information. Right? So you can see all of these different permutations of privilege and waivers and protections and multiple layers of law. And so for anybody who comes out and says, yeah, it's just cut and dry, right? It's clearly not. In this government, right, they are, they're sort of asking you to fill in the gaps here. They're saying, how is it possible that somebody could just call something that's top secret his personal records? I mean, even if you believe that. And then they go through and explain, why they think that can't happen. But even if he did do that, they would still have a compelling need for it. Why? Because it was once top secret. And so they can get it any which way, right? They're sort of trying to splice it multiple directions. And they're telling us that they think that the Bill Clinton sock drawer case is irrelevant here. They say that the district court decision is not about classified records and therefore it doesn't apply, right? So they're distinguishing the Judicial Watch case. And so they're saying apparently if Amy Berman had known that it was about confidential records, then maybe things would have gone differently in those cases. Now they write, More generally, Judge, Trump's response disregards this court's acknowledgement of its limited powers in this domain. The judge can only do certain things about special masters, and this court is being asked to do things beyond their jurisdiction by Donald Trump. And they say, if you do grant this special master, the public is going to suffer irreparable harm absent a stay. Why? Because of vital national security interests. Oh, gosh. Never-ending national security, ongoing investigation, and on and on and on and on. They write, Trump thus implicitly acknowledges that the government and the public would be harmed if we're barred from doing this. But as the government has been forward-looking, we're hopeful that they can resolve it. All right, let's fast forward a little bit. They say Trump has not established any actual harm, saying that, Judge, yeah, maybe there's been some leaks to the reporters or whatever, but they say Trump hasn't even detailed any harm that he would incur if we just put a stay on those 100 documents. If we just put a bubble around those documents and didn't give those to the special masters, Trump wouldn't even be hurt at all. They say that his team says that enhanced vigilance, whatever that is, they write, is in this investigation serving public interest and fairness. But the public, says the prosecutor, is best served by even-handed adherence to established principles of criminal procedure, regardless of the identities of the party or the degree of public attention. Can you believe this? These people are hysterical. They're telling you, listen, we don't need a special master, okay? It doesn't matter if this is Trump or a former president. None of that matters at all. What matters is the even-handed adherence to established principles of law. Coming from the DOJ prosecutors. Hilarious. And they say it doesn't matter, regardless of the identity, whether it's Trump or not, or the degree of public attention, doesn't matter either way. Here, the seized records bearing classification markings are the government's documents, and they were obtained pursuant to a duly authorized search warrant in the course of a criminal investigation. And Trump is not entitled to restrict the government's investigation pending a review of these records for the claims. The court should stay its September 5th, 2022 order pending appeal to the extent that the order enjoins further review for use of criminal investigative purposes and to require the government to disclose those classified records to a special master. They're saying, please, please, please do not give those things over to the DOJ or to the special master, signed by the DOJ, Juan Antonio Gonzalez, writing for the government prosecutors. And so it seems to me like they're getting a little bit panicky over those 100 documents. They really do not want the special master to get their hands on those documents. The other documents, they sort of seem like they've kind of been okay with those things being reviewed. But those very discreet, just 100 records marked as classified, they only want the stay as to those documents. Very, very curious to see what those documents hold inside. And we'll continue to cover, of course. Meanwhile, the judge, Aileen Cannon, got several threats made her direction in some voicemails. This is a criminal complaint against Tiffany Shea Geesh. 6 pages, and it is for threats towards a judge. The Donald Trump judge, Aileen Cannon, got some pretty nasty phone voicemails. And you can see this says, on September 1st, 2022, this individual was charged with 2 counts, influencing a federal official by a threat and interstate communications with a threat to kidnap and or injure. The judge, Aileen Cannon, the Trump judge who appointed the special master, getting death threats from a woman named Tiffany out of Texas. Let's see what this complaint says. This affidavit, written by Amy Avila. She's a special agent over there at the FBI. She's currently assigned to the Joint Task Force in Texas. She investigates crimes. She says, I'm a special FBI agent, and I am familiar with the facts based upon the following things. I've got firsthand knowledge, and I do believe that there is probable cause that a crime has been committed. She says, on or about September 3rd, the Honorable Aileen Cannon, Trump judge who oversees the special master case, forwarded 3 voicemails left on her chamber's telephone to the Deputy United States Marshal named Michael. The calls appear to have been left on or about September 1st, 2022. Phone number displayed a call ending in 6374, and the excerpts are copied down below. Voicemail number 1 reads as follows. Hi. Yes, this message is for Aileen Cannon. This is Evelyn Salt. I'm in charge of nuclear for the United States government. Again, Donald Trump has been disqualified long ago, and he's marked for assassination. You're helping him, ma'am. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to let you disarm effing live nukes off your coffee table. And how about you sit on an electric chair a couple of times over? You think you've got the magical ability to pop up from the dead, pretending that you're on the team of justice. Again, I told you he's disqualified. He's marked for assassination. And so are you, you stupid bee. Stand the F down or get eliminated. And guess what? I'm also Trump's hitman. So consider it a bullet from Trump himself. Oh my goodness, I couldn't even read this. My goodness. So she's obviously a little bit angry on there. Woof. Now, the full cell phone number, according to this special agent, is known. So they know who this individual is. All right. So not too hot on that one. All right. So that was at, what time was that? 1:45. Now, oftentimes there are unwell people in America, right? There are unwell people. Sometimes people are intoxicated. Sometimes people are, in the middle of crises and they just get a phone number and they make phone calls like this, right? They're unwell. They're not well people. But if this were a MAGA Republican, do you think this would be covered differently? Probably. We have another voicemail at 4:55 p.m. Eastern Time. Reads as follows. Yes, Judge Cannon, listen, my name is Evelyn Salt. I've been trying to get in touch with you. I'm in charge of nuclear, and your effing BS in your little court means absolute dick. My authority exceeds the POTUS, and what you're trying to pull is obstruction of justice, and this MFer is responsible for 9/11. Again, Judge, you're full of S, and I'm going to effing have you eliminated myself. I've already ordered snipers and a bomb over to your residence. Last voicemail. September 1st. 5:17 p.m. Eastern Time. To Judge Aileen Cannon. Lady, my patience is up. I'm a federal effing agent. I've been slaughtered to hell and back for 3 effing decades after Donald sold my nuclear effing arsenal and decided to slam it into the World Trade Center. You F up one effing thing for me after going through hell on earth, including being stuck on blank. I'm going to grab my license to kill, and I'm going to take my ass to effing Florida, and I'm going to personally throw a bullet to the, right in front of your children. And whatever you've got that's important to you, do you understand my authority? You stand the F down. Click. So the special agent at the FBI gets the voicemails and says, well, those are troubling indeed. Better find out what's going on here. A law enforcement database revealed that the 6374 cell phone was an AT&T cell phone number that went over to Tiffany. That didn't take long. A search of Tiffany Shea Geesh of open source data showed a Facebook page associated to that name. Specifically, the Facebook page of Tiffany Geesh. It says the Geesh Facebook account. Contained recent posts that mirror the language in the voicemails to include identifying herself as Evelyn Salt, references to being a nuclear expert, and a former President Trump taking her nukes and using them during 9/11. The United States Marshal Service also contacted the Secret Service. Secret Service also confirmed, yeah, Evelyn Salt is in fact Tiffany Shea based on the cell phone. Secret Service was also aware of comments and threats that she had made previously directed towards Trump. On September 4th, the United States Marshal Service requested emergency disclosure from AT&T for the cell phone location. They got it, located within the district of the Southern District of Texas back on September 1st. Based on the content of the voicemails and a positive identification of Tiffany as Evelyn Salt, agents from the United States Marshal Service went to her residence to interview her. Guiche initially refused to allow the agents into the residence. Good call. Agreed to speak with the agents through a window on the balcony of the residence before eventually inviting the agents inside. Ugh. Based on my conversation with the agents, I know that Guiche spoke with the agents for approximately 45 minutes. During that interview, she stated in substance or in part that she left the voicemails. That's an admission. That the 6374 number belonged to her. That no one else besides her has access to the cell phone. And that the Facebook account was used by her. And number 5, that no one else had access to the account. Ugh! 5 for 5. Following this interview, the agents received authorization to make a probable cause arrest of Guiche, obviously. And based on the foregoing, I respectfully submit that there is probable cause to believe that she did this thing, signed off on by Amy over there at the FBI. And the probable cause all signed off on by U.S. Magistrate Judge Peter Bray. So, all right, well, typically not recommended to admit everything to law enforcement, but she did that, and we'll see how that works out for her. But she did get arrested, and that is very interesting materials. Now, we have one final document that we've got to get to here on this segment, and there's big questions about whether Donald Trump has turned over all of the documents. Congresswoman Maloney says Trump still has confidential materials and that maybe they need to go get them. She sent this letter over to the National Archives on September 13, 2022. We're going to take a quick look at it. You may remember Miss Deborah Steedlewall, the acting archivist of the United States. Donald Trump said something to her during a ceremony. He said, "Oh, yeah, you work over there in the archives, must be a big building." And Deborah didn't like that comment. She said, yeah. Your time is coming, buddy boy. And here it is. So this letter is being written by Carolyn Maloney. You can see it's down here at the very bottom. We'll fly through it. There's a lot here. She's the chairwoman, and she's copying James Comer, who we'll talk about in the next segment. But Carolyn Maloney is on her way out. She just lost her election primary to Jerry Nadler, the 35-pound diaper waddling around Congress every day. But she is writing this letter as her last hurrah before she departs. And she's saying that, there are library books that are overdue. And before her time is up, she's going to make sure Trump returns every single one of them. She says, "Dear Deborah, over at the National Archives, head librarian for America, says, I am writing to you, madam, regarding President Trump's removal of presidential records and classified material from the White House after his term ended, and his dangerous decision to retain these sensitive documents in non-secure locations at Mar-a-Lago." Again, that talking point is so irritating. He was there all the time for 4 years. What are you talking about? It was perfectly secure. Well-established laws protect classified information, saying in light of revelations that Mr. Trump's representatives misled people, she says, "I'm deeply concerned that records may remain out of control in the custody of the government." Now, footnote 2, FBI found 48 empty folders, and so she's freaking out about this before she gets booted out of Congress. She says prior to August 8th, court-authorized raid of Trump's home, there were some concerns that documents had yet to be returned. Yet the August 8th search revealed that he improperly possessed more than 11,000 government records, again, most of those non-problematic documents, including more than 100 documents with classified markings, footnote 4. Now they're saying that in light of the serious risk, she says this, hold on a minute. Yeah, here. She says, in light of this, wow, okay. We're going to back up to this paragraph here. As the committee with the primary jurisdiction over the presidential records and as the principal oversight committee of the House of Representatives. The Oversight Committee has been investigating this for 7 months, they say. This inquiry, which is separate from the DOJ, right? So two parallel things. The Oversight Committee in the House of Representatives is pursuing this investigation simultaneously with the DOJ. They say it's separate from the DOJ. Our effort is to seek to understand the full extent of this conduct, including what types of legislative reforms might be necessary to protect the American people moving forward. Look at this. In light of the serious risk that Mr. Trump may still be retaining sensitive government documents, I urge NARA to seek a personal certification from Donald Trump that he surrendered all his presidential records that he illegally removed from the White House. Right? This is mirroring that same custodian of records document that we had seen previously that I think Lindsay Halligan signed. I think she was the custodian of record there, saying that all of the documents are back, leave us alone. And so Carolyn Maloney now wants Trump to sign that. And you see that they say specifically that they're concerned that he might still have these things sort of outstanding. I also asked the agency to conduct an urgent review of presidential records recovered from the Trump White House to assess whether the presidential records remain unaccounted for and potentially in the possession of the former president. Yesterday, we talked on the show about Trump making a surprise visit to D.C., and people are saying, well, he's moving boxes off airplanes, and he's moving things from Florida over to New York and back again, and the list, the whole thing is this big document moving problem. And now they want to know where those documents are. So apparently, I guess the only alternative is to just go raid all of the residents that he visits indefinitely. They say that he's in violation of the Presidential Records Act. Federal records law says the following. They say there is risk now that Trump has retained sensitive documents. She writes, on at least 3 occasions, Trump has had the opportunity to turn these things over to documents, and she lists those out. But she is now saying, look, we don't know what is outstanding, what has been returned, what has not been returned. I urge NARA to seek from Trump a written certification saying that he's surrendered everything, all presidential records, all classified records. He's not made any copies, no reproductions. He's not transferred any of the records to anybody else since his term ended. Although the president is not required under the current law to provide a certification. I believe the exceptional circumstances warrant that Trump do the same thing in Congress so that people can know. Oh my gosh, what a joke. Although the president is not required under the law to do this, I think he should do it anyways. What a waste of a letter. The Committee on Oversight and Reform is a principal oversight committee of the House of Representatives. We got broad authority to do this stuff. Thanks for responding to me. Yeah, just a useless. No wonder she's not going to be in Congress anymore because she writes waste of time letters and she says there's no even basis for that at all. I thought we were going to get to that. But no, just says Trump should do this if he's a nice guy. Well, Carolyn, your party's not being very nice. Okay, your DOJ is not being very nice to him. So if you want him to be very accommodating and cooperative with you, maybe you should show some respect the opposite direction. Stop trying to shift the burden of proof. Stop trying to eliminate the presumption of innocence. Show him the equal protection that he is due and leave him alone. But that, my friends, is the update on the Trump cases. We will continue to follow, and I appreciate you subscribing and liking this video before you hop onto the next video here on our channel. And we've got one final segment here today, my friends. We're going to jump into some Hunter Biden stuff, as you can see. Hunter Biden, Andrew Rice. We've got some interesting developments about a potential second laptop that is floating around that Andrew Rice said exists. And we're taking a water break. Cheers, my friends out there. I see JC the Music Man's over there. Who's over on Rumble? Let's see, over on Rumble today. Shout outs to Nexit, Soul Warrior Vibe, member of the Publix over on Rumble. Cat Crap Fever. I forgot to give Rumble shout outs yesterday, and I apologize for that. But shout out to my friends over on Rumble. And we've got one final segment on the day before we wrap it up. Hunter Biden laptop. The saga continues. In fact, there may be a second laptop, so we might get season 2 of the whole saga. We'll have to wait and see. We've got new updates. Big one coming out on CNN from this guy, Andrew Rice. He's a journalist over at the New York Magazine. And while here on this channel, we've talked a lot about Hunter Biden, covered it all the way up in the months leading up to the 2020 election, covered it afterwards and beyond, as we continue to see the FBI prosecute selective crimes while forgetting to prosecute other crimes. We're now seeing that CNN and other people are saying, oh, my goodness, there is some interesting stuff here. Wow, let's talk about it. And so we're going to hear from Andrew Rice over at New York Magazine, who drops this bombshell on CNN saying, yeah, guess what? After I wrote that whole piece about Hunter Biden, I'm learning from some of Hunter Biden's friends that there may, in fact, be a second laptop out there with a lot more problems on it.
I think that, I think that if you accept the fact that Hunter Biden was a person who was addicted to drugs, alcohol, other substances, who was going on a sort of a journey of self-destruction during this time period, it's fully plausible to think that he might have misplaced an object and not necessarily know what happened to it. In fact, the people close to him have propagated the idea that perhaps there's a second laptop out there that it might actually trace back to, which goes back to the general point that Hunter Biden was capable of losing more than one laptop that potentially contained devastating information about himself during this time period in his life.
Yikes. A whole second laptop. I mean, there was enough bad material on there. The laptop from hell, most of that stuff is available all over the place. It's pretty horrendous materials on there. But you can see her face as soon as, look at that. You can see it right there. She goes, what? Huh? A second laptop? What? You're gotta be kidding me. We're doomed. And the person who runs the camera obviously cut to the second scene so that you didn't get to see her sort of shock face.
The people close to him have propagated the idea that perhaps actually there's a second laptop out there that it might actually trace back to, which goes back to the general point that
it goes back to the general point. Yeah, there is a lot about this laptop that a lot of people have known for it quite a long time. We talked all about it here, but apparently on CNN they go, "You're kidding me! Multiple laptops? Well, that's amazing." Now, on this channel, we really unpacked a lot of this, but remember that the FBI had this laptop. The FBI knew all of this stuff. Everybody knew this stuff. It was as obvious as can be, but the media buried it. And let's listen to how they did that.
So the thing about McIsaac is that
this is McIsaac. This is the gentleman at the laptop repair store who actually got the original laptop from Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden dropped it off, apparently, signed a receipt for it. All of this stuff was known well before the election. He had the laptop seized from him by the FBI in the months leading up to the election. And we're learning now that people like Timothy Thibault and others at the FBI were trying to put their thumb on the scale so that these stories were not covered.
While he is legally blind and is unable to drive, he is not so incapacitated that he is unable to identify people. He actually, of course, for his work, needs to be able to look at computer screens. He has a very, very, very poor vision, but his vision is not so impaired that it's preposterous to think that he could identify Hunter Biden. Also, I mean, McIsaac has a signed receipt from April 12th, 2019.
Signed receipt.
That someone whose signature looks an awful lot like Hunter Biden's dropped off a device there. And most importantly, and most compellingly, I guess, from an evidentiary standpoint, he has a subpoena that the FBI served on him.
Remember?
And they came and took away this laptop. Yeah. It passed into the hands of the FBI, presumably because it had some kind of relevance, they thought, to the ongoing federal criminal investigation into Hunter Biden's finances, the status of which we don't really know much about at the moment.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, why would the FBI come and seize a laptop that has no evidentiary value? Why would they seize some fake laptop that some Russian hacker just assembled a bunch of stuff on and gave to Rudy Giuliani, who dropped it off at some guy's laptop repair center and then faked a receipt and all of those things? And conveniently, also somehow had access to Hunter Biden's filming himself in weird, very problematic positions. It was obviously real. Everybody knew it was real. But they covered it up, didn't they? And so he went through the litany, said even the FBI had it, and they didn't show it to all of us. Why? Well, remember this guy, Timothy Thibault, we spent a lot of time talking about him. He was a retired or fired or resigned or whatever, former FBI agent. We talked about him back on the August 30th show. And back then, we said that he was resigned or he walked out or something. Remember, he was a top-level FBI agent under fire because he was investigating or involved in the investigation of Hunter Biden. They say that he resigned last week. He was walked out of the FBI. 2 U.S. officials confirmed. They say these officials say he reached retirement age, had worked at the FBI headquarters in D.C., recently removed as the position of a special assistant agent in charge over the Washington field office. And we'd learned all about this. Remember, Christopher Wray sort of said, well, Timothy Thibault, well, that's not the norm at the FBI. And Jim Jordan's very upset about this, and Chuck Grassley as well. But now, as he has resigned, as Congress maintains their oversight, Chuck Grassley is communicating that he needs to come and testify. He says that the agent, Timothy Thibault, confirmed via his lawyers that he left law enforcement agency last month. And he's accused by Republicans of shutting down an investigation into Hunter Biden. They say FBI officials wanted to take action with respect to this investigative information the FBI had in its possession related to Hunter Biden. However, Thibault blocked the FBI from doing what would normally be done. This is what Chuck Grassley told lawmakers. They say, accordingly, the investigative activity and the information could not be advanced as it should have been, which means the FBI could have gathered more evidence with respect to Hunter Biden, but cut bait instead. And the FBI and Thibault cut bait right before the 2020 election. In fact, it was worse than that, right? They didn't just say we're not going to investigate this. Many people in the intelligence community said that there was actively nothing wrong with any of this stuff. They signed a letter with 51 so-called morons from the intelligence community. Previously, Grassley accused Thibault of allegedly opening an investigation into Trump and shutting down an investigation into Hunter. Thibault was named several times by Grassley and Ron Johnson in letters to the FBI, alleging he displayed an animus towards Trump, calling Trump on Twitter a psychologically broken, embittered, deeply unhappy man. Thibault might have violated the Hatch Act and other things. Whistleblowers are calling him out. Here's another photograph of this guy who had a big laundry list of problems with Trump and really with Republicans in general. And you may remember a certain senator blasting Christopher Wray over that when he was called in front of Congress. But Timothy Thibault left the FBI, and now we're hearing from other people like Grassley and Ron Johnson about this, saying that Thibault's gone. Whistleblowers are now coming out. Here's Senator Ron Johnson saying that, previously I've urged people to come out and speak to us about the problems that exist within these agencies at the FBI and the DOJ. Ron Johnson says that's happening. People are putting their heads up and making themselves heard.
Well, the good news is you do have some of the people with integrity that have knowledge of some of the wrongdoing. They're starting to come forward because they want to restore credibility and integrity to their agencies. So whistleblowers came forward, and Chuck Grassley talked about how the FBI had a scheme in August of 2020 to downplay the derogatory information on Hunter Biden, to basically deep six the investigation. We have whistleblowers saying that once they got Hunter Biden's laptop, which, by the way, they took possession of in December 2019, they were told, you will not look at that Hunter Biden laptop, and that we will not change the outcome of this election again. So they obviously know there are partisan actors in the FBI. They're from the left, and they're acting politically.
And they don't want bad stories to interfere with Donald Trump being eliminated from American political life. And so they'll continue to make those prosecutions indefinitely, is what it seems. We also have Rep. James Comer. James Comer is on the Oversight Committee, and he's somebody who says that, a lot of what we're hearing from the Biden administration and a lot of the changes that we've seen have been done to protect the Biden crime family, to sort of make it so the oversight committees, the congressional leaders, the people who might otherwise raise red flags about Hunter Biden's nefarious activities, his travel, his deals with different business people from different countries all around the world, they would be identified and called out. But as soon as Joe Biden took office, he reversed a lot of these protections in place. And so James Comer is going to be telling us a little bit more about these, calling them, well, let's let him explain what these things are.
This is a big issue, because prior to Joe Biden becoming president, any member of Congress could request from the Treasury Department a list of suspicious activity reports. Suspicious activity reports were put into place right after September 11th by then President George W. Bush as a way to try to track foreign transactions coming in to fund terrorist activities. These suspicious activity reports, or SARS as they're referred to, have grown over the years to include things like money laundering. But in any case, if a bank files a suspicious activity report, which seldom happens, if a bank files a SARS, that's the bank telling the Treasury Cabinet, we are pretty confident our client is involved in some type of criminal activity. Two things Joe Biden did on the first day he took office. Number one, he stopped members of Congress from having access to suspicious activity reports.
Interesting.
Number two,
why?
He hired Nicholas McQuaid to be the head of the FBI criminal division. McQuaid, who we've learned is a law partner of Chris Clark, who is Hunter Biden's attorney. So two things he did on the first day in office, in my opinion, were done solely to block Republican investigations of his son, who was being investigated by the FBI. Now we know the FBI has been involved in a cover-up, or at least by Timothy Thibault, to turn a blind eye.
So Joe Biden hires a lawyer to run a division at the FBI. That lawyer is a partner with Hunter Biden's lawyer, who represents Hunter Biden. Isn't this just beautiful?
To suppress any other FBI agents from investigating Hunter Biden. I'm simply requesting from the Treasury a list of those suspicious activity reports, which under Bush, Obama, or Trump, any member of Congress could have gotten. I'm the top Republican on the House Oversight Committee. They continue to block me from having access to those bank records.
No oversight. The top oversight Republican on the Oversight Committee gets no oversight because Joe Biden and the Biden administration want to protect their little crime family, and the Hunter Biden cash machine continues to flow. And so that, my friends, is it for the Hunter Biden saga. We'll continue to cover more, as there will always be. There may, in fact, even be a second laptop. And so we'll wait around and see what that has to reveal. Thank you for subscribing, and thank you for hitting the like button. And that, my friends, is it for the segments for the broadcast on the day. We covered a lot of ground, the brutal inflation numbers. We talked a little bit about Trump and the cases that he's got, the threats that went out towards Judge Aileen Cannon, and the letter from Carolyn Maloney and others. And then lastly, we talked about all the Hunter Biden saga. But now, now it is time to hear from you, my friends, everybody over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. And so let's do a quick refresh over on the brilliant comment repository thread before we jump in on that. And I saw some YouTube comments come in today. An hour ago, Bear Ashby says, they tell us the problem, but they give no solution. Yeah, we all know well, the solution would be less government. And so they don't want to tell you that solution. So they talk about more government. They think we can print money and have more government bureaucracy solve the problems that the government, the mere existence of the government has created. The only real solution would be less government. They don't want to propose that solution, obviously. Roland is here. He says, Biden declared MAGA Republicans a clear and present danger. He admitted to the national security of the United States, but that was implied. Well, Roland, yeah, I mean, I've got clips. We've got clips of this guy who said that MAGA Republicans are a threat to your economic security and to your personal liberty, or something like that, like verbatim almost. He didn't say, maybe not. I think he said that they're a threat to democracy. So yeah, I think that is a national security threat, right? I mean, terrorists were a threat to democracy. MAGA Republicans are threats to democracy. Okay. It's crazy, Roland. Oil Smoke Jones is here. Says, what's that on Kareen's head? Okay, I'm not going to read that one. I don't know what was on her head. Probably something in her hair. Just Cause says, hey, Rob, can you see if Shane Souza is hidden? If so, it was the boomer moment. Can you unhide the brother? Yes, I can. Sorry, Shane. Sorry, Shane. Oh, my goodness. So yes, I don't think I can do that right now because I have to go into a bunch of settings and look you up. So yes, Shane. we can do that. Just Cause just eliminated Shane Sousa, is what it sounds like. John McGarvey has been a member for 3 months, has hit the like button. What are you people, Democrats? What are you, being stingy with your likes? Says John McGarvey. Thank you, John. And thanks for being a member for 3 months. That's a lot of fun. John McGarvey. I think, John, are you on both places, Locals and YouTube, I think, which is amazing. I'm grateful for you. Ronnie Cole says Joe Biden is literally saying making America great is terrorism. Yes, that's what he's saying. Directly is what he's saying, Ronnie Cole. Yes, threats to America. They're threats to the whole country. I mean, the whole thing is nuts. All right, let's see what we've got over on Locals. Just did a nice refresh, and we've got some good comments in here. Quillin Mom says the FBI pressured people to give up their gun rights, according to certain documents. I'll take a look at that one, Quillin Mom. Another one from Locals. Professor equated President Trump's case with Dred Scott. Yeah, we got that one. Good to see you, Quillin Mom. I'll take a look at those links. TOS says, tremendous Tuesday to all of you and watching the Watchers. Former LEO says, there was an interview with the Ukrainian official who stated that the Ukraine wants $5 billion per year forever to support the economy. I call BS. The U.S. should email the Ukraine that the United States is effectively immediately out of the empire building business. Yes, I agree with you on that one. A lot of money going over there, and there doesn't ever seem to be a cutoff. Rai T says, hey, Rob, your webinar website has inspired me to start a fan site for you. It's called RG Fans Online to chat about Rob and other fun things.co.uk.org.com.net. Come check us out. Well, that sounds like a great place. Yeah, that sounds like a beautiful place. I have to check that one. Might have a URL problem in that one. I don't know. I'll have to try it out. I guess later. Hopefully you're having fun over there. That sounds scary. Vientikis says, CPI's manipulated garbage. Try these. Survival Monkey, Bloomberg. Also, make sure to watch the Monkey, GPS, and J Bravo channels to see how the markets work and what's really going on. Good recommendations there from Vientikis, who's back from game night. Hopefully you had some victorious gaming sessions last night, V. Vientikis says, in that sort of mocking text, I wonder how the stock market could do so poorly since Zelensky opened it the other day. That was hard to read, V. Yeah, it's a good one, though. Heather says, this is like them spiking the football on 16 cents on a July 4th meal. They are so out of touch. We're already in a recession, and I think they're trying very hard to push us into a depression. From Three Girlies in the House. Vientika says, look at it all. All the numbers are zero. Very interesting. Talking about the New York Fed, says, just a reminder, the Fed started the repo operations in September 2019. For all of you who thought it was Trump that was giving the economy a boost, it wasn't. How it basically worked is that the Fed would sell some junk securities for, let's say, $10 and some back and say, come back tomorrow and sell us those securities back tomorrow and we'll give you 1001. Now multiply those by billions. And now we've basically been under QE4 since 2019. Qualitative easing, number 4 since 2019. From Vientikis, this one came in, says, just as a point of technicality, many people think inflation means prices going up, but what it means in economic terms is increasing or inflating the money supply. Realistically, the idea of price inflation is a misnomer. It says, until we meet again. From V. Fed Cure says, something about to happen when Pope Francis instructs the Vatican entities to move all funds to the Vatican Bank by September 30th. Whoa, that's kind of interesting. That's from Fed Cure. Shout out to Fed Cure. Speech Unleashed says, Biden trying to force wages higher artificially will simply result in more automation, which will lead to less job positions and more unemployment. It will also lead to costs rising even higher because businesses will need to charge more for products to be able to pay these higher wages. The Dems think that they can force businesses to pay higher wages to workers without causing those businesses to offset that increased cost somewhere else, which is less jobs, more automation, less benefits, more outsourcing, and reduced hours of operations. This will also affect small businesses the hardest, which will cause many of them to close, allowing big corporations as the only available option for consumers. Yeah, that's all true, Speech. I am a small business owner, right? I mean, we spend a lot of time here having fun, but yeah, we've got 20 employees at the R&R Law Group, so I pay close attention to this stuff. It's very, very important stuff. It's just, it's awful what they're doing. And I agree with you. I think that they are, if they could put all law firms out of business and have everybody go through Amazon or something, right? They would do that in a heartbeat. And I think they're trying to do that, right? They're trying to do that. Zach Nichols says, with only 17 days left in the great month of September, don't forget what comes to an end soon. The federal gas tax holiday is what Zach Nichols says. Speech says Trump needs to preempt any future raid by making fake confidential cover pages and then stapling over the pages that say fooled you just to tick them off. Yeah, I'd get a bunch of red folders and just leave them all over the place, wouldn't you? Three Girlie says, isn't it the FBI and the DOJ's burden of proof whether or not they were classified or declassified? I would say so. I mean, that's my take on it. I didn't think Trump has that burden. It sounds like they're trying to put the burden on Trump. I agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you. They're saying he needs to prove his innocence, which is not how it works. It's like, well, yeah, anyways. Miss Lucky and Sergeant Bob. Sergeant Bob says, government arguments are so illogical. They're afraid that their charade will be exposed early on. Thank God we had a judge who wrote a great order. I hope even more FBI whistleblowers come forward. I have to believe there are some FBI agents who do not agree with the political witch hunt. Sergeant Bob says, thanks to you, Rob. I think when I'm reincarnated, I will return as a criminal defense attorney. Did I really say that? Sergeant Bob, I think you should. We'd love to have you on our side. I guess now, what does that mean? Does that mean I get reincarnated as a sergeant? Ugh, I don't know. I don't know. But we do need more good officers, Sergeant Bob. And so, maybe we could swap sides on that. But we'd be grateful to have you, Sergeant Bob, as a criminal defense attorney. Hope you're having a great day out there in, where you are. And let's do a refresh over here on the chat. And then we're going to swap back to the previous page, trying to make sure we don't miss any comments here. And it is loading. I saw Uncle Shane send a super chat in. Says, what is Biden and the Democrats' goal with all of these objectively failing policies? Is it by design, ignorance, or fulfilling promises to lobbies? It's a great question. And I could probably riff on this one for a while. It depends on what level you want to talk about. I mean, I think that at a global level, the governments and the corporations want to consolidate power. And this is that process. Really, is if I can answer it very simply, right? Forcing ESG, I think probably at some point we'll see a universal basic income. They'll tie your privileges to your universal basic income, to your card, right? If you want to get your money at some point, you'll give up a bunch of rights. And they can now turn the money off, turn it on, and all of this stuff. I think that by creating an economy where you're more reliant on the government and less reliant on small businesses, more reliant on big corporations, you're locked down, you have less autonomy, personal autonomy. That's what they want. And this is on the road to that. Now, short term, domestically, I think that these are just people who are promising their constituents and all the people that put them in power money, right? I think that the $370 billion that John Podesta is going to manage in the White House is a slush fund for Democrats. That's all. So that's the goal. The goal is to raise a bunch of money so that they can slush it around to everybody else, except the people. Ronnie Cole says, Joe Biden is literally saying, we got that one. Shout out to Ronnie Cole. Roberto Gonzalez says, off topic, but was Katie Hobbs found guilty of practicing racist and sexist policies while in office? Or is there context missing? I don't think she was, found guilty of anything. Like she didn't have a trial for being a racist and then was found guilty. But yeah, Carrie Lake has said that she's a bona fide racist, and I don't know the story on that. I mean, everybody's a racist at this point. I've been called a racist. I got called a racist on our morning walk and talk the other day, right outside. Somebody called me an effing racist P. What? As I was just walking around the neighborhood. Okay, whatever. So everybody's a racist. It's like, whatever. And, I'm sure Katie Hobbs is too. It's sad because I think that there as a matter of fact, is real racism out there. But when everybody says everybody's a racist, then suddenly all of the actual racists sort of hide in the weeds because everybody's a racist. It's the dumbest thing ever. All right, Speech Unleashed says, who were the judges on the Court of Appeals who will review the DOJ's appeal appointed by? Were they appointed by Dems or Repub? That will probably indicate what the ruling will be. Well, I don't know. It's a good question. So it's Florida and... what's weird with the Court of Appeals is sometimes they will actually be not the full court opinion, right? So they get assigned to different judges, and it's hard to predict who they will be. Like, it's not like the Supreme Court where there's just 9. Like, we just know who's on there. There's sort of pools of judges, and then they'll assign them to 2, and you get sort of an en banc opinion, and then it goes to the full panel, and it's sort of a complicated thing. But your point, regardless, is well taken, Speech. Judges are important. Sasha Sisha says, good evening, Rob. Can you explain special master process to me in like I'm 5? I have a brain of a child sometimes. I understand that they act as a referee, but who nominates it? And if it's the government, can Trump provide names? What qualifies them? Common grounds. I apologize if these are dumb questions, if they've already been asked and answered. So we did talk a lot about this basically yesterday, I think. So you may want to read through that show. Watch that show, Sasha, because there was a joint memo. And what happens is both sides sort of submit their position into one document, and then that goes over to the judge. So it's sort of like both sides are preparing their lunch order. They say, I want these things and I want these things. They go on the one item and they give that to the judge, and the judge says, well, you can't have those and you can't have those. And so it's a simplistic way for the both parties to sort of lay out their positions, and then the judge will decide, okay, this is what the terms are. And all of those orders came in yesterday. And we read through, I think it was not a long document, 12 pages, the memo, the joint memo. And that explains all of it in pretty much in detail. They're fighting over who pays for it. And they have one person that they both agreed on. So the prosecutor submitted 2 people, the defense submitted 2 people, and they agree on one person. And so if the judge comes back and appoints that one person, we're going to have to learn about what the roles are, what the judge is going to rule, what this person can look at, what they can't look at, and also who pays them, and whether Trump has to come out of pocket or whether they split the fees. It's all going to be decided. So not a dumb question. We don't have a lot of answers yet because the judge hasn't issued any rulings. So we're all still sort of debating that. Good to see you, Sasha. Rai T says, I suspect if a MAGA supporter left death threats on a Democrat judge's voicemail, also threatening the president, it'd be broadcast and made big news everywhere. I can't stand double standards. You just said something similar as soon as I sent this message. It's good to see you, Righty. Great minds think alike, as they say. Speech says, how is Trump responsible for 9/11? Because he's Trump, obviously. Did you know that he was responsible for World War II also? Yeah, it's true. He wasn't president then. Her defense will probably be temporary insanity. Yeah, well, unfortunately, the Civil War is Trump's fault too. All right, let's see what else we've got over here. We had a Hunter Biden video. Yeah, so this is on YouTube. I'm not going to play that one because of the imagery in it. But Robute said this. Of course, Hunter Biden has a second laptop that's been leaked. Of course, he left behind an unsecured laptop that you'd expect from a crackhead. Here's some footage he made into a song. It should be on every news network. And so there's a video over on YouTube if you want to go look that up. But it's probably an 18 plus video, or will be. Former says, Rob, just wondering if any of the plaintiff's filings point out the undisputed fact that the leaks of the classified information did not occur until the DOJ assumed custody of the documents. I don't think that they have made that point. The classified documents would have been more secure if left in the custody and the control of the former POTUS. Yeah, we have definitely made that point, but I don't know if they have. Robute says, LMFAO, Shay sounds like a glowy Fed online, but ends up acting like an idiot and confessing everything to the feds and allowed them to search through her house. Yeah, not a good call on that one. Typically, don't want to just spill your guts to law enforcement in most situations. Sasha says, JC, how is this person not plastered in the media yet? My goodness, the lady sounds like Cartman from the South Park. Respect my authority. We have Robute says, yeah, Steve Bannon was correct about the raids. On Trump allies, as Tucker Carlson was subpoenaed. What? He was subpoenaed? Actually, Steve Bannon is probably understating the witch hunt, which is occurring by the American Gestapo. Fedcure.org is here. Says, Rob, where's the outcry from the so-called criminal justice reform and prisoner rights organization against Biden's weaponization of the criminal justice system? Crickets! Or the Republicans, to be honest. Where are the Republicans in general? While we all watch the total abrogation of power of 50 years of criminal and prison law and complete disregard for the United States Constitution and amendments, where's the outcry? Where's the nonprofits? Where are the advocates? All the people who put it on their mission statements but take no action at all. This is the result of a mail order president. Only we, the people, can stop it. Fedcure.org. Check it out. Fedcure is over here on Locals. Good to see you, Fed. Zach Nichols says the House oversight members are the following people. Miss Lucky says from Sergeant Bob, I think cackling Kamala taught other agencies how to create word salads. Yeah, it's like the magnets on the refrigerators, right? With all the words on them, you just mash them all together and just say, hey, Kamala, just read from this magnet. Rio Butte says, Trump should not comply with Congress and the archive request to return the documents and just tell him to pound sand. Then he should place safes with troll items in there like Melania Trump's and her underwear and record them seizing it. Oh, gosh. Delegitimizing the American Gestapo. Three Girlie says, why do they excuse Hunter's behavior on his drug and alcohol abuse? They couldn't hide her exasperated voice reaction like air being quickly let out of a balloon. It was. It's like these people have no idea. Wait a minute. Hookers? Russian hooker? What? Sergeant Bob says, Hunter's drug dealers know that they have a rich live one on the line. Thus, he needed money as providing via corrupt activities. Thus, where be the feds? Rio Butte says, what? Credit card companies and the Gestapos are looking through your purchases without permission. I saw that coming. They're not trustworthy. Use cash or crypto to buy your guns. We talked about that on the morning walk and talk today. Yeah. Ridiculous. Here, Miss Lucky and Sergeant Bob says, when a law enforcement official retires under pressure, there is a very real reason for that action. Sergeant Bob is not buying the Timothy Thibault just retired and rode off into the sunset. Here, Thunder 7 is sharing the Babylon Bee. Says the FBI concerned that if MAGA doesn't conduct a terrorist attack soon, they might have to fake one. Yeah, I mean, things are getting tight over there. They're like, it's been a little bit too quiet. Should we go kidnap a governor again? What do you want to do today there, Special Agent Old Chuck? Well, I guess we should probably write another PP tape dossier. That sounds great. Yeah, I'll bring it over to Jim Baker at the FBI. Oh, wait, he works for Twitter now. Gosh. Yeah, thank you there. That's from Thunder 7. We had another one from Former says, every present or former FBI or DOJ employee should be investigated if there are violations of the law or departmental policy, should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and if possible, should have their civil pensions forfeited. From Former. It's pretty tough there. I like that. Sergeant Bob says, seems to me the legal family of the Bidens is best described as a case of grossness. TOS says, Rob, listening tonight and think, can you brought up possibly a second laptop if one thinks about the rig colors, saying that Biden threatened MAGA because he knows he's caught. That's from TOS Forever. Yeah, maybe he's panicky. Thunder writes, come on, man. So what if the banks flagged Hunter and Joe's accounts? So what if China Joe hired a lawyer who works for Hunter's defense? So what if over 50 law enforcement peeps lied about the laptop being disinformation from Russia? So what if the child images were on the laptop and the computer repairman was threatened by the FBI and the lunatic left and thought that they were going to be knocked off? What's really important is that Trump went to D.C. and nobody knows why. That's all they care about. TDS is at a peak right now. That's true. Stock market is in the toilet, but TDS is at peak maximum. If you have high TDS, now's a good time to sell. V says, I want to once again bring up the idea of someone being lower on the list. SLOTL. Circles of power always constrict, eventually excluding more and more people. So if you're interested in having one group of people having power or privileges over another group of people, always consider that you may one day become a slottle. Someone who has a use for now, but eventually will be banished from the circle of power. This is what we're seeing happen to lower level Republicans right now. But once again, the whole Democrat-Republican thing is a distraction. From VNTKiss. Stookie is here. Stookie says losses are incurred in stock market only if stocks are sold. Hold until they go back up before selling. Good time for bottom fishing. Buy low, sell high. It's good advice from Stookie, although this is not a financial show and this is not financial advice. And Stookie is not offering that either. However, a lot of people feel that way. Miss Lucky and Sergeant Bob say, simple. Just ask the Taliban to give the weapons Sleepy Joe donated to the Ukraine. Zero sum. Yeah, it's true. It wasn't like $80 billion worth of gear over there. It was a lot, like a lot. All right, we had a couple more. I did a refresh. And Rye T says, what are some good cases you defended that you could share with us? It'd be great to hear some of your big success stories. Well, those are good to talk about. I typically reserve some of our case outcome results over for the R&R Law Group channel. And I kind of segment the content over there. So, outside of sort of, war stories that I sort of get into here, I try not to get too deep into some of the personal, war stories with clients because, it's sort of private. It just feels sort of private in relation. But I have some really wild stories that I could certainly share because those cases are old. But it just feels like if I can't work them in naturally, it feels like I'm just sharing stories, and that just feels a little bit weird. But Thunder7 says, breaking, FBI seizes Mike Lindell's phone. Oh my gosh. All right, so my pillow guy had his phone seized. Miss Lucky, Sergeant Bob says, it all boils down to follow the money. Rye T says, what's the story about someone calling you a racist P? Well, right, that's on the video. That's on, it's on one of the morning walk and talks. I was just walking down the neighborhood and some lady drove by and said it. I don't know. I don't know what the story is, but it was on one of the morning walk and talks from last week. I think it was, I forget what day it was. I don't even know. It was interesting. Emotional old cat lady says, show us the package. Emotional old cat lady. This is a YouTube show. This is not an OnlyFans show. Show us the package. Oh my goodness. What is this turning into? Did I miss it? No, of course you haven't missed it. Emotional? Goodness. All right. No, I don't know what package you're talking about. I think I do, actually. I think you're talking about the package that arrived in my office, which I do intend to pick up tomorrow. Thank you, emotional old cat lady. Miss Lucky says, Sergeant Bob says, no dumb questions, Sash. All good. Sasha Shisha, absolutely true. Watch Your Pats is here. Says, this report from the Gateway Pundit seemed like a bombshell. While reviewing those sensitive library books that Trump was overdue on, whistleblowers stepped forward recently and revealed that the top FBI brass smuggled cell phones into secure rooms called SCIFs in violation of Bureau rules. Over from the Gateway Pundit. Let me give a quick open on this one and see what we've got. This story came out September. Yeah, Washington Times reporting this. Looks like more whistleblowers step forward to Congress, accuse high-ranking officials of bringing phones into SCIF facilities, top secret facilities. Just amazing. Yeah. So double standards, no limits, of course. Thank you to Watch Your Pats for that. The Antikiss is here. Says that over the weekend, a USA Today article from a year ago saying that Trump didn't help with 9/11 was going around. I remember watching Trump on the news a few days afterwards. I remember thinking, what's the guy from Home Alone doing on the news? The clip that was making the rounds too, where he was talking about having 50 or so workers helping out. Also won some, lost some last night, since you brought it up. Well, that's good, V. Can't win them all, but you got to keep playing. Sergeant Bob says, you go, former LEO brother. We had another one from Facts Matter. Says, liberals are so upset with Trump, you would think he stole 90% of the Haitian relief fund, sold 20% of our uranium to Russia, deleted 33,000 emails, and let innocent Americans die in Benghazi and Afghanistan. But he didn't do any of those things, but they are still melting down nonetheless. We're going to do one final refresh, and Alberta Traficante is over on YouTube. Says, Katie Hobbs paid out a large settlement to a black female staffer who was fired after she found out that she was being paid $30,000 less per year than her white counterparts. Well, okay. I do know that Katie Hobbs made several hostage videos. I did see those. I'm so sorry for being such a racist. But I didn't know about that settlement. Yeah, so I wonder how much they paid out for that. Amazing. Amazing. All right, let's see. Rye T says, I had no idea there was a separate R&R Law Group channel. Thanks for sharing. I wouldn't expect anybody to share personal info, but hearing about cases without names overall would be interesting. I'll check out the other channel. Yeah, so right, I've got a whole vision for that channel. I really do want to do more of that content, but I guess my question to you would be sort of what kind of stuff do you want to hear about? The war story stuff I'm perfectly fine with, and I do try to talk about some of that stuff and sort of integrate them into the show. But a lot of that stuff, I want to build sort of a nice framework so that you can hear from other people at our firm who can actually share stuff that they're doing, because I am sort of in a different role at our firm now. I spent, the first 7 years of my law career in court, hustling every day. Sometimes I'd be in court 5 or 6 different courts per day at my first law firm. And so I've got stories out the wazoo, but it sort of feels I gotta work them in, or maybe we can do like an AMA or something on locals where we can talk more about that stuff. But yeah, definitely check out the other channel, because I'm going to be populating a lot more of that, hopefully with not just me, but other attorneys from our firm. And we'll talk a lot more about case outcomes and stuff like that. But it's a great suggestion. The criminal law stuff, I mean, it's a lot of fun. I love criminal law. I love it. It's a ton of fun. Good to see you, Rye. Sergeant Bob says, maybe you and I should co-author a book of our war stories. It's not a bad idea either. It's like, what would that be? Like a yin and yang, like the light side and the dark side. Although I don't know, I don't know what side you want to take there, Sergeant Bob. I think there is an opportunity there. Some good unity out there, to use a Joe Biden phrase. Former LEO says she said package and not junk. Well, that's true. Yeah. I know. I was being inappropriate there. All right. But, sometimes it happens. Let's see what else we've got. Couple more before we wrap it up. Thunder7 shared this one, says, this is the same FBI and the DOJ who have no interest in Joe Biden, his family getting over $31 million from Chinese communists, or the 30 years of crimes revealed by the hard drive they covered up for over a year. FBI and the DOJ are now officially the Biden State Police. That coming in over from Rudy Giuliani. And what is that, on Getter? Or is that on Truth? I'm not sure. But that, my friends, looks like it is it for us for the day. And my goodness, right on time. It is Tuesday. And so I've got a hard stop at 6 p.m. for men's group time, which we're going to jump into. But that is it for us for the day. And I want to thank everybody who was a part of the show over at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Thank you to everybody who's chatting away over there and supporting the work that we do, sharing those amazing stories throughout the day. Big shout outs to Zach Nichols, Tweaks in the House, John McGarvey, B-Spec, Bonnie's over here, Kelly Sell now, Lilu Dallas, Multipass is here, along with others. Hello to C. Reed and the rest of the chat over there. My friends over on Rumble, we've got Candy Guess in the house, along with V, Eric Scorpio, Anything's in the house, Soul Warrior Vibe. Shout out to our friends over on Rumble, Jesse Michael, and others. We've got on YouTube, our members, Jenny B, Life is Good, Mr. J-Bug in the house. Good to see you, Mr. J-Bug. Catherine Smith, Curtis Bartle, Life is Good, Sarah Brown, Bear Ashby, Catherine Smith again. I see all in the house. And my other friend, let's see, there's Zulu. We've got the Vez, we've got Zorro's here, Paw from EP, N19. JP Base Senior, K-Bean's in the house. And so come check us out either on YouTube or over on Locals. I am also a lawyer at the R&R Law Group, criminal defense law firm in Scottsdale, Arizona. We have a mission to help good people charged with crimes find safety, clarity, and hope, not only in their cases, but beyond that, in their lives. We offer free case evaluations, 480-787-0394. We love to help people, provide service to them. And if you want to learn more about how we do some of that using YouTube in order to help people understand the work that we do and how we can help them, I am hosting a free masterclass this Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern time. You can register if you're a lawyer, if you're a business owner. This is really a course for other lawyers and law firms, but if you can replace the word law firm with my business, like I'm a realtor or I'm a gardener, right? I did construction, swimming pools before I went to law school. Anything, right, that you're doing service, providing value, you can probably learn something about using video, as we have done for our practice, the R&R Law Group. Check us out, ytclientcashmachinemasterclass.com. Be about an hour or so. And then if you want to continue working together, we'll certainly have an opportunity to do that. But check it out, ytclientcashmachinemasterclass.com. Otherwise, my friends, I want to thank all the mods who continue to mod down the fort for us and keep things nice and orderly. Shout outs to Vienticus Prime, K-Bean, Just Cause, Lean, Playin' Hooky, Ronnie Cole, Zulu, Geomancy Games, and our friend Henry Dixon, who stopped by some time ago. Thank you to our Spotlight supporters who support the show with a little extra love. At the end of the show, we share some screen real estate with Chris Romero, David B3, Dr. EMB in the house, along with John over at qsimple.com. Thank you to all of you who are supporting the show with that little extra monetary love, and we are grateful for your support. But that, my friends, is it for us for the show. We will be back again tomorrow to do it all again. And I hope to see you right here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Have a tremendous evening, my friends. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.